right, welcome everybody. It's 6:32. Colin is here tonight. He's around, but he doesn't have any announcements of his own, so I'm just going to get started. And let's see, we are on class 11. We are actually already into the second half of Unit 2, if you guys can believe it. And we're really starting to pick up some speed with our spring stuff tonight. We have lots to cover. We're going to talk about models and model binding. So this is the M in MVC. So we've got our usual format tonight. As mentioned last class, on class 13, there's no actual content or lecture, but there will be an alumni panel. You'll have some former Launch Code students who will be able to answer lots of questions that you might have about what to expect in Liftoff, also known as Unit 3, apprenticeships, building a career, and that will take place. And then you'll have, basically, it'll essentially be a catch-up class after that for the rest of the class time. So you'll go to your TA groups. Graded assignment number 3 is coming up after we get through chapter 16, and we still have, a ways to go for that. But that's due on Monday, the 23rd, and you'll have a catch-up class, the class before that. But I do intend to do an intro video for this, like I've been doing for other graded assignments. So I will get that out to you guys probably in the next couple of days. I also wanted to mention that my lecture examples repo for this art gallery project that we're doing from now until the end of the unit, I'm making changes to the branches from what I had done the last time I taught this. And so you may have already forked it and have it on your machine, and you may find that suddenly I am doing things in class that does not match the code that you have on your local machine in different branches as we go along. So if that's the case, I have instructions on my README in the main branch of this repo that you can go and read all the steps that you need to do in order to pull in my changes so that your local copy on that you forked is updated with my changes. Okay. Uh-oh. Man, I did that last class too. I don't know how I did that. Okay. All right. So let's get into tonight's lecture. We're going to talk about models and model binding. So this is where we really want to start to learn how to work with data. And we're just going to kind of start small with creating some classes that we are using as models tonight, and thinking about, how to relate everything, how to send it to the template in some new ways. So I'll talk about the M and MVC, creating a model class using models in a controller, how templates are going to use data from models, and oh crud, we need a data layer, which is something that we're going to do temporarily just to be able to manage our data outside the controller until we actually have a database to work with. And then how to create a delete form. We're going to add that onto this project tonight. And then how to do model binding to simplify things quite a bit with forms. All right, so the M and MVC. This, as you may recall from a couple classes ago, the model view controller pattern, where the model handles the logic and manipulation of the data. The view is what handles the page elements and the interaction with the user. So this is our time leaf templates. And then the controller is the go-between. It's responsible for the routing of everything and handling all of the requests that come in from the browser. And then eventually we will have a database that will allow persistence of our data. But for now, as soon as you hit that, you might, start saving things and storing it somewhere in the application. And as soon as you hit refresh, it's all gone. Okay, but that's okay. We're going to build this a little bit at a time. All right, so let's talk more about this model idea. The role of the model is, just to manage data, but it's not the data itself. It just forms up the structure and the logic and allows you to give a shape for the data. What data types should it be stored in? What kind of data structures are you using to store it within, that object, and so on. So if the controller is going to request data from a model, you'll already have an organization for it. It'll be an object with properties. And then, if the user is actually putting something in a form and sending it. And so now your application receives this data. The model structure is going to make sure it gets stored properly as well, because everything will match up. You can make all your form inputs, match up with the fields that are in the class. So you could say, yeah, this sounds like a job for a class, right? Yes, it does. So there's this thing called a POJO, a plain old Java object. This is how we define models in Spring Boot. We're just going to use a Java class that exists on its own. We can define things the way we need to there, and then Spring has some really cool ways for us to make use of that in the controllers and the templates. All right, so let's talk about that first. How are we going to create a model class? First, you need to understand how the file structure works in a Spring project. You always want to put your models inside a models folder that is right alongside the controllers folder in your package. So we'll do that. And then you might say, what fields and methods do I need, right? So there are some things that you just pretty much want to have as standard when you're using a Java class for a model. You want to have an ID and a static next ID. We've used this pattern before. It's a very easy way to continue creating new objects of the same class and giving them all unique ID numbers. And we don't have a database yet to do that for us, so we're going to code it. A field for each property of the object that needs to be defined, of course, a constructor to make, constructor to make sure we can instantiate those objects. And by we, I mean Spring, because it's going to do it for us. Maybe you have other code that needs to be run, like incrementing next ID. All of that goes in the constructor. And then of course getters, and you may have setters for most things as well. We want to have a custom toString method, and you've seen how I've used those in the past in some of my examples where it comes in handy if you want to just print the object and have it display some information about it in a certain way, that you can just either call toString, or even when you go to print something, it might implicitly call it, right? And it just makes sure your data shows up in a nice, easily readable format. So it's a good idea to always have that. And then it's pretty standard to have a equals and hash code method, which all can be generated with IntelliJ very easily. Okay, so let's see. At this point, I think I'm going to start kind of going back and forth between some live coding and the slides here. The first, you remember this artwork project we're doing, right? And we can get this up and running so that we can see, just as a refresher, what everything looks like right now. All right, so we have our art gallery project. We're on the home page. We can use this link or this link up here to get to the artwork listing. Right now, we have coded, we have a hard-coded little hash map here with 5 things in it with ID and name pairs. And we've just got that displaying on the page. And if we want to add artwork, we can come in. We've got a simple form that just lets us add the title of the artwork. That's all we've done so far. So we are going to rework the way that we're doing this to use models, and then we're going to add a little bit more on by adding the ability to delete them as well. We're going to accomplish all of that tonight. So the first thing to do here is to create an artwork model so that we can actually, instead of just having a single string being stored here with an ID number, we can actually start storing an object that has multiple properties. And we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to have the artist's title and their name, and that's it for tonight. We will add more properties in the future. So I'm going to come down here to Art Gallery, this package, and I'm going to say that I want a new, oh boy, was this in the right place? Yes. New package called models. And then inside here, we're going to create our first class that's going to be artwork. So this represents a single piece of art. And we can set up kind of some of the standard stuff. We want to make sure that everybody,
is this blue box? Nice.
Everybody check your mics, please. All right. Private static, next, oh no, int. We have to make sure it has a type. And then next ID, and we're going to set it to 1. Remember that static fields get saved at the class level, not at the object level. So this class will always be keeping track of whatever this value is, and we're going to increment it up every time we create a new object. However, the regular ID is just going to be private and final because we don't want it to be changed. And we'll set it in the constructor to whatever the current value of next ID is, but that exists on the instance level. Every single object has a unique ID, as well as, oops, wow. Let me find my keys again. There we go. Private string title and private string artist. Okay. So title and artist are really the main things we're concerned with. So I can generate a constructor very quickly with all three of these. Actually, not all three. I want just these two. And what I'm going to do here is say this dot ID is equal to next ID, and then make sure that next ID gets incremented so that next time the next object will have a new one. Okay, and then we can do our getters and setters. I'm going to do that for let's see, title and artist, and I'll just do getters for ID. We don't need one for next ID. It's pretty much internal to this class. Okay, I think. Yes. So we'll do that. And then we said we needed toString, and I want to just include these two. And then we'll do a custom equals and hash codes and just use the default for this. We want to base it only on the ID. All right. So if you remember when we were looking at these before, when we were talking about classes and these special methods, what's happening here is first it says, okay, if I'm comparing against another object and they are actually the same object, then return true. If it's null, or if they aren't even the same class to begin with, then return false. Once we know past that, those early returns, if we continue on, then that means we can go ahead and cast it to the artwork class now that we know that it's not just another class or another object or whatever. And then we can return, does this ID equal the actual ID of the other object? I think I said that backwards. Does the ID of the other object equal, yeah. Anyway, I'm sitting here arguing with myself, which is silly. But that's what happens here. It's just a way for it to tell whether it's the same object or not. Okay, and then the hash code is something that just creates a very unique special ID of sorts using the original ID, which is something it just needs behind the scenes sometimes. Okay, so we have all of that. That pretty much sets up our model. This is it. So we will be, as we get into validation and things like that in the next class, we are going to be adding more things to the model. We'll have some annotations to add and things like that. But for now, we can keep it pretty simple with just the fields, the constructor, the getters and setters, etc. The one thing I do want to do here is customize this toString. However, all I really want is just to say return the title plus parentheses plus artist plus closing parentheses. That's it. I just want to have a nice way to format this so that if I want information on the object, I can just say, it'll return the name and the artist in parentheses, and it'll just look nice that way. Okay, and we will make use of that tonight. Okay, so that's the model. So now what do we do with it? When you have a controller, you want to make sure that you're making use of your model classes to organize everything into properties of an object, particularly when you are receiving things from a form and you want to make sure that each of the values coming from those form inputs is set into the object properly. So we're going to do this first by having separate parameters here, and so we can use the new keyword to create a new object, give it those values, and then add it to the collection wherever we're storing the data. And we're going to do that a couple different ways tonight too. So we're going to start small, but this is the idea. Let's say you have your post handler for your form, and maybe this is a sign up form. You could say process sign up, right? You have 3 query parameters, the first name, the last name, and the email. And when you do your studio tonight, you're going to have actually username, email, and password, but it's the same idea. So we'll say, okay, well, we have a user model. We can create a new user, pass in those values, and then add it to some sort of list we have called users. And then maybe we just, redirect back to the homepage after that. So this is kind of, pretty much how that works. So there's the query parameters. Here's where you're creating the new user object using those parameter values. And then we would, store it in some sort of collection. So this is a pretty common little pattern, except we're going to learn a better way to do these parameters in a little bit. But for now, let's just start by making these small changes. We can go over to our controller, our artwork controller, and we've created the artwork model. So this part is done. We want to update this map to hold artwork objects instead of strings. So we can change this string right here as the typing to artwork and import that. And then as soon as we do that, it's very unhappy because now these are strings and it's expecting artwork objects, right? Objects of the artwork class. So what we're going to do is say new artwork. And I did not mean to get rid of the string. I'm going to have to do this manually, I guess. There we go. Title, and then comma. Johannes Vermeer. Okay. And then finish my parentheses there for the instantiation. Okay. So we're going to say we want item with the ID number 1 to be, this, and then we can do the same thing for these. Why don't we just stick though, for the sake of time, because we have a lot to cover tonight and I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take. Let's just say we have 1 to start with, and then we can use our add form to add something there if we want to. Okay, so later we're going to do something different here, but for now, all we really need to focus on is making sure that we have this list also be able to handle artwork objects. And so it's going to just create a list of, whatever complete objects exist as the values in these key value pairs. So it'll be an artwork object now that's part of that list. And then we're passing that list down to the page so that we can display things. So then the next thing you might say is, well, then, what are we supposed to do in the template, right? Now that we have a whole object coming in and not just a string. So we're going to talk about that next. And the add form, we're going to update that too. Let's go ahead and do just this part. I'm going to come down here and go to the add form. No, the display form. I want the index page because we just want to focus on being able to see this list and make sure it's going to work. So we're still bringing things in under the name artwork list. We have that handled. I'm sorry, guys. I'm very distracted apparently. Okay. We're bringing everything in under the name artwork list still. It's still an array list. That part is cool, right? We got a list that we can iterate over. But and we're also checking to see if it exists. Does it have a size? And so then if it does, we'll have this table that has the title. But we actually have 3 pieces of information now that these objects will have. They have an ID, a title, and an artist name, right? So let's add columns here to increase that, and then and actually match what our model has. And then we should be able to see exactly what we're doing. So I'm just going to copy these 2 and say ID, title, and artist for the header rows. And then where we're actually looping through the data and we're looking at one artwork. So now artwork is not a string, right? It's an object. So what we're going to need to do here is have artwork.id, artwork.title, and artwork.artist. And you know what? I just realized I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't done the slides for this yet. Let me go explain what I'm doing. Okay, so if you pass an object to a template, you just use dot notation to access its properties. And you're saying, but aren't those fields private? But Spring is awesome. And so Spring says, hey, I see what you're doing there. And there's a getter for that. And I know how to use it. So it lets us be really simple and just use those dot notation references, but it actually uses the getters to go get the values for us. So we can make it look like this. Use dot notation anytime we want to reference something off of the object that's been passed in. And then it's just going to automatically, pull everything through for us. So this is what I'm doing. I'm basically saying I'm receiving an artwork object now, not just a string. So I need to access each of the individual pieces of information, in this case, an integer and 2 strings that are coming from the artwork object that's defined in the model, because it all, is now being tied together. So let's go see right now. We haven't done anything with the add form yet. We're just looking at the index page for artworks, this page right here. So I'm going to restart my application here. It's going to give me grief because I haven't done anything with this down here yet. Oh, oops, not there. Here. Okay, let's just get that out for now. We'll come back to it in a second. Okay, so now if I refresh, you see we have ID, title, and artist. All 3 of those were successfully created by just creating an instance of the artwork class as a model. And so that should make sense, right? Because you know how Java classes work. And that's what we're doing. We're just using plain old Java objects created from Java classes. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and update our add form as well. So let's see, we want to come back down here. We need to make sure that our form is going to accommodate the additional properties we've got. And so we just need to make sure that this is defined as putting in an artwork, but it can't be a string. It actually has to be like this entire thing. We needed an object of the artwork class, right? So what we're going to do is say we're going to accept a string named title and a string named artist. And of course, our class is actually going to create the ID for us, right? So the only 2 input fields we're going to have on the page on the add form are going to be for these 2. And then what we can do is do kind of like we did above, where we say, I want a new artwork and I want to give it the title and the artist. And that'll create that object for us. It will create an ID. I mean, this is kind of messy because one thing you could do actually, what would be better is to say, listen to me. I've been using JavaScript, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, artwork, and we'll say artwork equals new artwork, and then we can do the title and artist. And so we can create it first, and then what we really should do is go and get the ID now. So we can say artwork get ID, and then here we can just pass the artwork object that we've already created. That's really better than handling this with our own next ID here, really. So we should just get rid of this part. Okay, and ultimately we're not going to hold this in this file at all. We're working our way towards storing the data out of the controller because it really shouldn't be here. This has just been a means to an end. Okay, so we've got this fixed up now where we're actually going to be ready to receive 2 different parameters from our form. So now we just need the form to actually be updated. So we're going to modify this to have 1 more field, and I'm just going to copy it and say artist And then it's still of type text, and I will call this one title and this one artist so that they match. Remember that these names, the name attribute on the input field, they have to match the names that you give these parameters, which have to match the names of the fields in your model. It all has to connect from end to end. Okay. So let's try this out, and we will add some more art. And okay, so I'm going to just refresh this, and we'll say add artwork. And now we have a title and artist. It doesn't look super pretty, but there it is. So we're just going to say, you know, Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci, and boom, we have our add form now working to add things in from the UI. Okay, so this will get us pretty far so far. We're doing pretty good on time. Who has questions about what I've done so far? Questions, anyone? I see someone has a question about how to find my lecture code. So that's in my slides. Anytime after a lecture, when I put the slides out, you'll find hidden slides that you'd never saw that are still part of the slide deck that actually have like screenshots of my stuff, and it'll have, you know, a link to my repos for my lecture examples. So you can always use the link in the class announcements channel in Slack to get to all of the PDFs on Google Drive, and then just go to the one for the right class, and you'll find the links right in there. Okay, if there's no questions about anything that I just talked about, let's go ahead and take our break now, and then we have quite a bit to still talk about and do when we get back. There we go. right, welcome back. All right, so now we are at the section titled, "Oh crud, we need a data layer." So I mentioned this in the past when we were talking about HTTP methods, how when you're working with a database that there's this concept called CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete. So this sort of functionality, commonly known as CRUD operations, you know, CRUD stands for each of these words, and we will have a special class that's built into the project for this eventually called CRUD repository. But we're not there yet. We have to wait until we learn a few more things and are able to put a few more things together. So, really, you don't want to have, as I mentioned before, don't want to have your data being stored in your controller. That's not what a controller is for. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to have a Java class that isn't for creating an object. It's just going to be a static class only. And we'll hold that map of key value pairs where the key is the object ID and the value is the object in that class, and then have some static methods that will handle these operations to add and delete and create and all those things. Well, adding and creating are the same thing. And so we have, we'll create an add method, a get by ID when we want to look up just a particular object by that key. Get all when we want to get a list of all of the object, all the values in the key value pairs. Update when we want to edit an object, and delete when we want to remove an object. We're not going to do any editing tonight, but we are going to introduce deleting. So we'll need to put all of this in place. Just remember, this is not a model. It's a Java class, but it's not a model. It exists purely for storing and managing objects. So this is kind of conceptually what we're talking about. We call this a data layer because it's just going to exist kind of between our controller and our model. And we're going to have it in a separate folder. We're going to put it in a folder called data, right alongside those models and controllers folders. And anytime we want to, do any of these things, save something to one of the, to the list, or delete something from the list, we'll just call these methods directly on the class. So like, user data.get all, or user data.delete with, and given an ID number, something like that. If we had, a layer called user data, which we don't, because for here, we're going to have artwork data instead. Okay, so let's go over and start creating that. It's going to be a lot more straightforward than it sounds. We're going to come up here to Art Gallery and create another package and call it data. Okay. And this one will create a new Java class and we'll call it artworks. Apparently I called it artworks data, not artwork data. So that's fine. We'll create artworks data, and I don't need to add the .java because it will. There we go. Okay. And in this particular file, we're just going to create that map we talked about. So private static final map that has an integer for the key that's going to correspond to the object's ID number, and then an artwork object that actually, and I forgot to import maps, so let me do that. There we go. The artwork object is the value. Okay. And so we'll call that artworks and just say new hash map. Okay. So now we just need to put these methods in place. So public static void add, which will allow us to pass in an artwork object. And then we're just going to say artworks put, this is going to look real similar to what we just did over in the controller, artwork.getID, right? And then the artwork itself as the value. And that'll be the key value pair that gets stored in the map. If we want to be able to find by ID, we can do, public static void, not void, my bad, public static artwork, because we're returning an artwork object, right? And so we're going to pass in an integer ID and then return artworks.getID. That's not right. Artworks. Oh, I see what I did. Huh. Okay, thanks for bearing with me here. Wow. We don't have a method called get ID. What's happening here is we're using the get method of the map here that allows us to just go get the object that is the value of the ID that we pass in. Okay. I was like staring at it and still not seeing it. Okay, static. And here's where we want to have and we're going to use collection, and I was debating whether I was going to do it this way. Sorry. I'm doing a lot of like arguing with myself in my head as well, which you guys can't hear, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And we'll just say get all, and you notice that I've been using things like when I create a list, an array list, I might actually type it as a list. If I create a hash map, I might type it as a map. That's because things like map and list and collection are interfaces, not actually classes. And so it gives us the opportunity to hold things at a slightly higher level so that we can take advantage of polymorphism, which, as you may recall, means that we can have lists sometimes of slightly different things of slightly different classes, as long as they all inherit from that thing and we're using what they have in common. So it's just, I don't know that that's really going to matter for what we're going to do for this application, but it's generally a good practice. Okay, so hope that helps clear that up a little bit. And then we're just going to return the values, and we'll just, go into this map and say, give us the values as a collection. And then we will be able to use that. If we did it strictly as an array list, the template won't know what to do with it. So we have to do it as a collection instead. That's the other reason we're doing that on that particular one. And then we're going to have one last one. I'm not going to bother doing a one for editing because like updating, because we're not going to be doing that in this app, I don't think. Okay. So then, artworks, plural. Okay, so here again, we're actually taking advantage of just the existing remove method that exists for a map, and just saying, I'm going to give you an ID, go in, find the thing that matches that ID, and delete it from the map. So now we have some basic methods that are static, so we'll call them directly on the artworks data class. And that's what this class is for. We're going to store things and make use of this to help us add and delete things from it, or look them up when we need to look them up, or get the whole list when we need a list. And ultimately, when we start using CRUD repository with a database, it's essentially going to be doing these exact same things. So we're just kind of like building our own generic version of this. All right, so now that we have that, we can come over to our controller and we can actually start changing things over, because we no longer need to store a hash map here. We can get rid of this altogether. And instead, we can say that we want our artwork list here that's being creative here. We actually don't even need to do that anymore. So instead, we're just going to say that we want to pass in an artwork list, and what we're looking for is artworks data. So we're going to go to that class and call get all. That's the method we just wrote that'll allow us to, there it is. All right, had to import it. That'll allow us to get that collection, and then we'll be passing it into the index with this handler. So that's one place where we needed to change that. All right, so we've done this. We've done this. Let's come down here. Okay. We are, we've already done this part, but we have not yet, we're not going to do the model binding till the last. So right now, all we really need to do is make use of that class method to add the artwork to the collection. because we no longer have that map here in this file. So instead, we're going to just get rid of this and instead say artworks data and say dot add artwork. And that will do it. We've created the object with the two strings that were passed in. So it now has an ID and everything. And so we just pass that in and we let these methods over here take care of everything for us. It pulls the ID and sets it as the key. It sets this is the value and we're done. So we're getting closer to the way things are going to work when we actually have a real database. All right, so that takes care of this part. And now we should be able to continue to make this work. I'm going to restart the application. Everything else should work the same, but we'll verify it. Now you'll notice it says we have no artworks to display, and that is correct because I got rid of that map where we had actually hard-coded something. So now we go in and we say, let's create a new art, and maybe this time we do The Kiss by Gustav Klimt. And there we go, it's been added. So our data layer is working exactly as it's supposed to. It's storing the data for us. It's giving us the ability to add it and to retrieve the list so we can display it on the page. So that's all working. All right. Before I talk about the delete form, does anybody have any questions about what I just did? I feel like I just saw a hand up. Yeah, Sneha?
Can you explain again why we don't need ID in the collection get all?
Why we don't need it here?
No, in get all method, we are just getting values and get all methods in like we are getting the collection in controller, I think.
In the control, yeah. Okay, so let me get rid of this. All right. So you're asking why we don't need the ID anywhere in here?
Oh, sorry, not control. The model artwork data. I'm not sure which class was it. We did that get all
Yes, here.
artworks. Yeah, that method. Yeah. So why don't we need IDs for it?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Okay, so this is something that might seem counterintuitive at first, but we are storing these in a map to where the artwork is the value, and that's the entire object, including the ID as a property of that object, right? But we are using a map so that it's easy to look them up, because if we take the ID and also set it as the key in a key value pair, then we don't have to like cycle through a list and keep matching the IDs until we find the one we're looking for. We have a map and we can just look it up directly. So we do this for ease of lookup and for removing, because we can just pass in the ID for finding it, for removing it. But if we need to do something like, just display it, we can just pass the artwork itself. And we do want a collection in that, like a list in that case. So we're just going to create this as a list by doing this so that the template can use it and iterate through it and just have access to the object, which still contains the ID, right? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah,
So
go ahead.
So we are having map integer as the same ID and the artwork ID same.
Yep.
Both same, and artwork ID
Yeah, because
itself has its own ID.
Yeah, because we set it that way from the beginning.
I see. Okay, I think I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. It just correlates them in a way that makes it really easy to access them. Yeah. Okay. Did I see another hand up? Nope. Okay. All right. So let's talk about deleting, so we can go ahead and take care of that part. And the last thing we'll talk about is the model binding, and we are good. All right. So if you want a delete form, you need to create a template for it, of course. And typically, a very good pattern for doing this, to make it easy on ourselves, we're just going to have a list of checkboxes. And every single one will represent a different artwork object. And then we can make sure they all have the same name because we want to be able to collect them as a list of IDs. So we're just going to set that attribute on each checkbox with the value that corresponds to the ID from the object. And that way, in the handler, we can just, create get and post handlers for the delete route. And then first we'll pass the list of objects, and those are artwork objects, to the template, just so we can create the list of checkboxes and correlate those IDs. And then we'll have the post handler when this form is submitted, it's going to send us a list of IDs. By matching that name attribute, as many ones as we have checked, it's going to continue adding those on as query parameters. And we'll have that, and basically Spring can turn that around and turn it directly into a list. And then it knows what to do with it. So we will be also setting request param, that annotation. We're going to give it a required equals false to make sure that value is set to false instead of the default true. Because what happens if the user submits the form, but they don't actually have anything checked? The application would break. So as long as we say that it's not required, it makes sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, so that's going to be essentially what we need to do. So let's go and actually do it, and I think it'll make more sense. Let's start with our template. Why don't we? Actually, no, let's start with the controller. Let's start with the controller. See, here I am arguing with myself again. All right, so we're gonna add get and post handlers for delete. So let's go ahead and start with the get mapping, and we'll just set it to be for artworks/delete. And remember, the reason that I can just say /delete when I mean artworks/delete is because we've set the request mapping at the class level to start with artworks, and then we continue on here building on that. Okay, so we'll have that. We'll have public string, and we'll say render delete art form. And then we're going to need that model class that we like to use for sending attributes down to some to a page, to a template. And first thing we're going to do is add the attribute that we want to send down, and we're just going to use that same value we've used before, artwork list, and get it the same way we did above. So we're just going to say go to artworks data, the class. This is our data layer that we're using temporarily, and just say get all, just like we did before. It'll give us the same list as the home page for the artworks route does, so that it can just list them out in that table. Only this time we're going to create checkboxes instead. So we have something, it's just as simple as this. We just have to pass down that artwork list to the page, and then we'll be able to create the checklist. So that's all we really need for rendering the page. Let's also, however, do the one that's going to allow us to process the form once it's submitted by the user. All right, so same path, but it's post handler instead. And we'll say process delete art form. All right. And for this, this is where we're going to use that request parameter. And remember, I said we wanted to make sure that we set required equals false, so that it can be submitted with nothing checked and not break the program. So here's what we do. We create an array of integers as the query parameter that says artwork IDs. And Spring is going to take care of receiving those query parameters and putting them into an array that can be used. And then we just have to loop through and say for each ID in artwork IDs, artworks data, and this is our data layer again. We're just going to call remove and pass in the ID, that particular ID out of all of the IDs that have been passed in from the page, because we may have checked multiple things, right? And then once that's done, we return a redirect to go back to the artworks route that just has the list of all of the artworks on it. which is up here. So it'll just go use this handler to render that instead. Okay, so we have our controllers in place. Now we need to make sure that the template is going to work with the data that we're passing down and be set up to submit, for the form to be able to submit things in the way that this will be able to successfully remove each of the objects from the collection we've got. Okay, so we'll go to templates down here, and I'm going to go into artworks and actually create a new time leaf template and call it delete. Okay, so now we have a new thing, and let me go, I'll see how we're doing on time. We're doing okay on time. All right, so I'm going to set this up first to have some of the same things we did before. Like if we were to go over to add, we kind of want to start with things being a lot like this. So let's just copy this to start with, and then we'll modify it. And this should say add link to add. Okay, so we need to get rid of these fields, and we need to change this to go to delete instead of to add, but it's still a post method, and we're going to say delete artwork, and I can get rid of that. And we'll say delete. Okay, so all we really need to do now is just build this this checklist, right? And so we're just going to have a TH block. Remember, this is what we often want to use when we're looping to make sure that everything inside of it gets repeated on each loop. And I'm just going to say, let's go over, you know, for each artwork that's coming from the artwork list that we're passing in. You know, do whatever's inside this TH block, basically. Just keep repeating this over with the information from each of these artworks. So remember this syntax. This is a local variable that we're creating that represents one out of this entire list. And we have to use the variable expression here, the time leaf syntax, to bring this in. And that's exactly what we said we were passing in from the controller right here. We set it right here and said, we're going to call it artwork list, and it should be this list of artworks that's coming from our data layer. Okay. So that's what we're going to be looping through. And then on each loop, we want a label. Label. Oh, goodness. Okay. And between the labels, we want to have an input that is of type checkbox, and have the name. Remember that we said this was important. Every single one needs to have the same name. So we're just going to hard code it like this, and we fix that. There we go. So they all are going to have the name artwork IDs, and this is important. It needs to be the same name as it is in the controller where we're receiving it as a query parameter here when the form submits. So I made sure to make it exactly the same. And then we said that we needed each one to have a unique value. So this is where we have a dynamic information. So we use TH value instead of value. You're going to want to remember that for Studio tonight. And we're going to use this variable expression to say, I want to go to the artwork that is the local variable of all these artworks and get the ID off that particular one. And then input is a self-closing tag, so I'm making sure to put that slash there. And then after that, I'm going to have my label, which I'm going to use a span to create it dynamically, because remember, with time leaf, you have to actually use the special syntax inside the opening tag to refer to a variable. And so I'm going to say, I want the text to be artwork. Now, you might say, why are you just doing artwork? Why aren't you saying like artwork.title or artwork.artist? Well, remember I wrote a custom toString. So guess what happens when I say that I want to just set it to artwork? it's going to automatically call toString. And then it'll, see, let me do a little note here. Implicitly calls toString. Okay, so we set that up in our model for the artwork objects that are created from that class, so that it would display the title and then the artist name in parentheses after, remember? So that's what it's gonna display after each checkbox. That's why we set that up, so that would make it easy for us to do this. Okay, so that's it. We just want an input with a label for every single artwork, and then it should create the whole list. And we have the action, which means it's going to actually use the post handler in the controller at this path. When we submit it, and we've got our submit button right there. So we have everything we need. Let's test it out. And then actually, before we test it, I just realized we still need to add extra links here. So now that we have 2 pages, we're going to start having extra links in our little second nav menu here. So I'm going to say add artwork. And then over in let's see, the artwork controller already has that. So, I mean, I'm sorry, the artwork index. This is what I want. Yeah, up here, we want to have a link to delete as well, so that we can get to this page easily. And then we're going to do the same thing in the add form and make sure we can get to the delete page from there, so that everything's consistent. Okay, now let's restart it. And come over and check it out. Okay, so we have no artwork. So notice we have links now to the add form and also to the delete form, which did not work. So let's figure out what just happened. Artworks, delete. This is probably something in my controller that's not quite right. Let's see. Delete. Artworks, delete. Did I not name? I did name it right. No, it says mapping for error, but I don't know what the error was. I wonder if I just didn't set the link up right. Let me check the link. Yeah, I should say artworks/delete. That was my bad. All right, so now I need to go check the other ones and make sure they're all correct. Artworks/delete, and then over on the delete page, I need to make sure this one says /artworks/add. Okay. All of this is important. You have to have the right route, or it goes and tries to find a controller and it can't find one, a method, because I didn't have the right path. Okay, let's restart it. And this time it should work. Oh, I did it too early. There we go. All right, so now if I go to delete, we have delete artwork. However, we are not seeing our list. So something is, of course not, because we haven't created any, right? I keep forgetting we no longer have hard-coded art. We have to actually create some. So let's, and really, we should add some sort of alternate message in there, right? There's nothing to delete. Let's just add a couple of things here to test this out. Let's add a couple more. Mona Lisa. All right. The Starry Night by Vincent. There we go. And now we have 3. Okay, so if we go over to delete, this is not very pretty, and I can fix this by putting, it's kind of crude because I'm not using CSS to control it. I could fix it by putting like a line break or something after, actually I should do it after the label. I could do like this. And that'll fix it. But for now, let's just test the functionality of it before we fix what it looks like. So let's say I want to delete Mona Lisa. I can delete. And before I do that, I'm going to open up tools here. I want you to look in the network tab when I do this. I'm going to say delete. And if we come here and see this delete and we go to this payload tab, you can see it says artwork IDs 2. So that's that query parameter that it's passing along that our controller is then picking up and putting into an array. So let's watch what happens when we delete two more. I'm going to go back to delete and delete the other two. And now we have it again. Oops. Accidentally sorted them. And now we see artwork IDs 1, artwork IDs 2. That's what's happening behind the scenes. It's creating those as individual query parameters, but Spring is picking it up in the controller and saying, okay, just throw them all into an array. And then that's something you can loop through and remove them one at a time. All right. And now we have no artworks to display because we deleted them all. All right. Let me restart. Oops. I did not mean to start this up in debug. Yep. Stop. Okay. Let's start this up regularly and go back and just check the oh, well, we have to have them. Okay. There again. Okay. The kiss, Gustav, Klimt, and we'll add water lilies, Claude, Monet. All right, now if we go here, yeah, the checkboxes are one after another. It looks a lot better. I accomplished it with a simple line break, which is, fine for now. Okay, so that's it. Now we have, the ability to delete artwork in addition to adding them, which is pretty great. So we're, making use of some of those CRUD ops without even having a database yet, just because we created that data layer as temporary storage while the app is up and running. Okay, so we are going to go back now and talk about model binding. This is the last thing that we're going to do. It's one more simplification that we're going to do that shows how Spring does so many cool things behind the scenes. So just, I'm going to explain it and then I'm going to demonstrate it, and just pay attention. And because sometimes the more simple things seem, and the more things are going on behind the scenes, the harder it is to actually understand what's happening, right? Because it's happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to try to explain. Okay. So if you have a whole lot of fields, let's say we had a form that had like 15 fields, that list of request parameters, the query params, would get really, really long. And you can imagine that over in a controller, trying to have that whole list here, or not here. Let's say it was this kind, where we have like an artwork with tons of different properties. That list would get really, really long, right? But the model, the fact that we have a model that actually defines all of those fields means we can simplify things. So there's a new annotation you can learn called model attribute, and it allows you to just say, just receive it as an object, line up all, as long as everything's named the same as it is in the model, it'll know how to instantiate that object automatically behind the scenes so that you don't have to. And then, yeah, again, the input names in the template needs to be the same as the field names in the class. And then you don't have to worry about naming them all individually right here. As long as they're the same in the template as they are in the model, the controller can do the rest. So you can see this example down here where I've used this model attribute annotation and just said, let's just have an object of this class, no matter how many fields it has, and no matter how many properties that object has. And then we can just use our add method to just add the object all at once, and it can do the rest. Because the object is already going to exist because Spring does it for us. And then we can, continue on with whatever else the method does. And that again is that static method of our data layer class for now. So let's go over and do this. We're going to simplify things in this controller. Let me get us to the point where we can see this a little better. All right, so all we really need to do here is to get rid of our request params here. We're just going to get rid of this entirely and say, okay, we know we're receiving a title and an artist as an individual information, but why not just make use of model attribute and say, give me an artwork object instead that contains a title and an artist. And now we don't have to do this line at all because and if you want me to show you that again, before we were having to instantiate this object ourselves. Now we don't have to because it's just been done by Spring. So I'll take that out and we can use the add method of our data layer, just like we did before, and just pass that directly in. It's a lot cleaner. And it doesn't matter how many you have. You can have a whole ton, and this is all you have to do to make sure the object is created with all of the values for all of the properties that come from the form. So let's prove that this works by rerunning here. And we'll come over and go to the add artwork form, and I'll add the Starry Night. And there it is. So it works, which is pretty cool, right? All right, who has questions about data layers and model binding and deleting? Devin?
Yeah, quick question. I think it was in the artworks data controller, I might be wrong, but on the artworks data dot remove ID, what data type was the artwork? It might have wasn't here. Is this I think it, yeah, it wasn't where it was defined. It was maybe it was in the controller.
Okay.
Uh,
In the delete handler here?
yeah. Is the artworks data, is that still like a map or is that like a collection?
Artworks data is the data layer class. That's this class here.
Okay.
And so what it's saying is go to this class and call the remove method here, which we are accepting just the ID from that list of IDs that came from the checkboxes, right? And it goes and accesses the actual map we have stored in here, where we're storing the all the different artworks. And it uses the remove method that actually belongs to the map interface.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
recall
they're
is
two
something that
different
recalls a
remove.
map.
They're just named
Gotcha.
the same thing, but this one is our custom method that we created that we call directly on artworks data. And this one is the one that's built into the map interface that allows us to just give it an ID and go here and remove it.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know this is confusing because things have similar names and there's a lot going on in different files, and it takes a while to get your head around all of it. So I'm trying to break it down as best I can. That was a good question. Anybody else got questions? Yumi?
I was just wondering, when you're using model binding, what happens if the user doesn't input all the data that that type of object is supposed to have? Like if you
Yeah.
just put in the title of the painting and not the artist?
Right. So if you have your code set up in a way that there is certain information that is absolutely required, and especially if it's a bunch of things that the constructor requires to set, then that's where validation is really, really important. And you want to validate both within the model itself to say, because we're going to learn this in the next class. You're going to be putting annotations on here. There'll be things like not blank or, not null. Or something that controls the size. It has to be greater than this many characters, but no bigger than this many characters. We can control all of that by putting some things in here that defines what is required, and then we'll actually have a way in the controller to connect those rules with a way to enforce it on the template and display error messages on each of the fields in the template. This is all what we're going to do in the next class because that is very important.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very good question. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. All right. Yeah, I know this is a lot, but I'm trying to give you solid examples on lots of things that will mirror the kinds of things that you need to learn how to do, not just for a graded assignment coming down the pike in studios, but also for capstone projects. Because when you guys get to your capstone project in Unit 3, you're going to be doing a whole lot of cred ops, and understanding how all this stuff works on the spring side of things is really important. Okay, so coming down the pike, as I just said, we're going to talk about model validation in the next class, and also this thing called an enumeration. You can read about it in your prep work, and then I'll talk about all of it during class and do some examples.
Yeah.
Also,
Oh yeah, I'm gonna need.
also, we have that alumni panel coming up on Thursday the 12th in 1 week. And then after that, we're actually going to switch gears for just a second, and we're going to go over into a different book altogether, the SQL curriculum, which is just 2 chapters long. The links will be should be in Canvas for you. And this is where you'll actually learn just the database side of things before learning how to connect it into Spring. So we're going to like set our Spring stuff aside and go practice and understand how the database works, how to set it up, how to create the tables, and how to write queries to get information out of the tables. And once you get comfortable with that after a couple of chapters, then we'll come back and integrate it all into Spring. So you'll do that for Monday the 16th, and then you have a catch-up class because the class after that, when we do SQL Part 2, is actually going to be where your graded assignment 3 is due on the 23rd. Okay. So tonight in studio, you're going to be continuing your spa day project. So this is the same repo you were working in the last class, but you're going to switch to a different branch. If you don't have it locally, you can do git branch -r to see the remote branches, and you'll get the exact name of it, but you can just check it out and should be available. So then you'll have a local branch that connects to your repo. Use the user sign up starter branch, and then they have some new things in there for you. You'll see that they've got like a client class and controller, and they've got you're going to add a controller, a user class, and you're going to have some new templates that you create in a user directory to actually register a user with a name, an email address, a password, and another field that verifies the password. And then you'll actually have the page where once it's submitted properly, it's going to send them back over to the page that lets them, select their skin type and services. So you're going to make some changes to that. There are some bonus missions that allow you to practice like the data layer aspect of things, stuff like that. So just depending on how far you get, you can delve into that. I will have the video up for this later tonight, and I will be covering everything, bonus missions included. So that's all you need, and you can head off to studio and have a great night. And I will be seeing you, I guess, see if I remember correctly, go back. Yeah, I'll be seeing you Monday for model validation and enums. All right, see you then.